Welcome. This is Cryptomorphy, and I'm here to examine the world of cryptocurrency, finance, geopolitics, and economics. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into CBDCs, also known as central bank digital currencies. I found a great article from some people that I've been following for a long time, Matterhorn Asset Management. They are precious metals dealers, but also do some excellent writing about economics, history, finance, and related topics. In this article, they talk about how to understand CBDCs, which is short for central bank digital currency. It's basically the government version of cryptocurrency. It's a great analysis and perspective on the topic. I thought you'd find it interesting. I'll leave a link to the article in the description. So let's get into it. The author introduces the article by telling us that in order to truly understand CBDCs, we should consider taking a look at the concepts of history, the philosophy of man, the math of debt, and the geology of gold. The Bible says that there's nothing new under the sun, so we need to examine history to gain a balanced, sensible perspective on the topic. We can look at the recent history of developed economies, and one of the most glaring characteristics of them is how broken, debt-soaked most of the countries of the world are now, stemming from out-of-control money printing and spending. The author says that the massive debt, coupled with history-blind and economically ignorant policymakers, lead to less freedom, failed fiat currencies, and the incessant march towards ever-growing centralized control over society. It seems like no matter what happens, our financial and political leadership always moves towards increasingly corrupt financial opportunists who use tyrannical policies masquerading as efficient solutions. But it seems that the only problem that gets solved is growing the riches of oligarchs at the expense of the people. The inevitable Klaus Schwab type. The author talks about the example of Klaus Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum, as a case study of how these oligarchs think. I find it funny that they all seem to agree on maximizing their power over people. They all have the idea that centralized power, in their hands of course, is the answer to all of society's problems. These people view every crisis as an opportunity to increase their power over the people in society. One of the biggest pretexts for increasing their power was the recent pandemic, even though the statistics show that the fatality rate was less than 2%. Post-pandemic numbers make it blatantly obvious to anyone who has critically and honestly analyzed the science, math, and other data to conclude that this microbe most likely was produced or modified in a lab, and that the global shutdowns and forced vax was a massive moral, scientific, economic, and political disaster of historic magnitude, if you look at it from a normal person's perspective. But if you look at it from the perspective of people who are power hungry and are always looking for a pretext to centralize power, it was an overwhelming success. It seemed to actually be a way to disrupt the economies of the world. The negative effects of these shutdowns will take many years for the world to recover from. In addition to this, the reaction appeared to be exactly what the powers that be would need to institute their Great Reset plan, or at least to move it forward. This plan is the next stage in securing control over the world consolidated into a one-world governmental structure. They've been working at this for a long time and seem to be determined to get it, no matter how long it takes and no matter the cost. Schwab's flawed premise: institutional faith. The typical statist's idea is that collectivism and centralized power is the answer to the problems in society. The author says it like this, quote, like China's Xi Jinping, Schwab's Great Reset is based upon the notion that systemic risks like inflation, pandemics, and geopolitical as well as economic distortion can be better managed by a global coordination of wise, centralized, and institutional players. End quote. But this is a pipe dream that has been proven 100% wrong over and over and over throughout history. It seems to always devolve into an oligarchy where the bureaucrats and their friends, family, and those corporate interests that pay them off always seem to do well, and everybody else suffers. It's how all of these so-called socialist collectivist economies end up. The author sums up the reality of what happens when societies are governed in this manner. Quote, "But what folks like Schwab, or for that matter Biden, Trudeau, Macron, Schultz, Johnson, and just about every other embarrassing but modern national leader failed to confess is that not once in the entire history of Homo sapiens has a centralized system, fascist, Bolshevik, communist, or socialist, ever brought an ounce of sustainable good to the world. The simple, tragic, yet historically and psychologically confirmed reality is this: efficient safety via central planning at the expense of individual freedom never works." End quote. It literally can't work, because if you don't have individual freedom, everybody is susceptible to tyranny, or to become a victim at the whim of whoever has control over the legalized use of force. America's flawed premise: faith in human nature. The author then starts to talk about how America is now pretty much a done deal. The experiment is basically over, and the country appears to be in a terminal, irreversible state of decline. He lists a remark from Ben Franklin, who told a person that, quote, "Eventually all democracies die, and usually by suicide," end quote. And that appears to be exactly what is happening to America. It would appear that the suicide has been a slow but dedicated march towards the netherworlds. The turning points toward increasing centralization is exemplified by 1. The 1913 birth of the Federal Reserve, which is a central bank, against which Thomas Jefferson warned in 1806. 2. The now increasingly obvious and centralized coup d'etat, murder of a sitting president in 1963, and that was JFK, in case you didn't know. Most people on here probably know that already. 3. The imperialist drift towards false flag wars of expansion, from Remember the Maine of 1898, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution in 1964, or the 2003 weapons of mass destruction fiction in Iraq, to 4. The exploitation of cataclysmic crises to slowly eradicate personal liberties in the name of national security under such euphemistically titled legislation like the post 9/11 Patriot Act. It seems that no matter the system, when you introduce the human factor, the self-interest of the people that run the system takes over. It seems that regulation ends up being used as a weapon of those who control it to enrich themselves and those who influence them, i.e. pay them, at the expense of the people. The modern flawed premise: faith in technology. Some people believe that we can replace corrupt institutions with technology. The author contends that this is a pipe dream because these advanced technologies are still controlled by imperfect humans. A case can definitely be made for that. All throughout history, we've seen virtually every economic system invented prove to be susceptible to manipulation for the profits of the few at the expense of the many. They've even manipulated the use of precious metals. Okay, technically they just did an end around the precious metals until they demonetized them from the current banking system. Regardless of that, gold and silver have maintained their value for thousands of years. Gold is not the perfect money when it comes to ease of use in commerce, but it is without rival for preservation of value. Nothing else comes close. The same cannot be said about fiat currencies, every one of which has eventually reached its intrinsic value, which is zero. Enter CBDC, the latest lie from above. The author feels the same way that I feel about CBDC, in that he can see that they can be used to reduce or even eliminate our freedoms. He states that CBDC is not a new currency, but is only a new payment system that is digital and encrypted, in contrast to the current paper-based credit system. He states that CBDCs are just, quote, more crappy fiat money just in digital form." End quote. Even worse, CBDCs are not cryptos even though they are digital and kept on an electronic ledger, but they don't involve any blockchain. The perplexing thing is that even though CBDCs use ledger technology, it's controlled by the central banks. Now, if that isn't a cause for deep concern, I don't know what is. If you've been paying any attention to what's been going on in society, you are well aware that most of our economic problems come from central banking and the fractional reserve banking system. Now imagine if these same bankers that have been creating quadrillions of dollars with that system now have control over a digital banking system. It sounds like a recipe for disaster, coupled with a frighteningly powerful method to monitor, control, manipulate, and punish every person on the planet. The powers that be didn't openly announce the CBDC concept until the pandemic crisis. And we know that whether or not this pandemic was engineered, and a lot of evidence points to that conclusion, it conveniently dovetails into exactly what these people want to do, which is to continually centralize power into the hands of fewer and fewer people until we have a small group of people that call all the shots on the planet, and everybody else just has to follow their orders. Now, what could possibly go wrong with that? Fed Chairman Jerome Powell says he thinks that the Fed's focus with CBDC is to improve on an existing safe banking system as a complement to, not a replacement of cash. I don't believe that for a second. These collectivists are always seeking to centralize their power. Once they get people to use these CBDCs, they'll concoct some pretext to remove the cash from society. Guaranteed. I don't trust them. Let me rephrase that. I trust them to do everything they can possibly do to exert maximum control over the people. These people do not believe that we have any right to resist their control. Megalomania personified. CBDC's other story, One Big Lie of Many Omissions. The author then goes on to speak on the most likely true motivations behind their persistent push to get us to accept and use CBDCs. 1. To kill the crypto competition. As the author states, the success of cryptocurrencies would eventually become their undoing because they are outside of the banking system. This means that they are a direct threat to sovereign power. These people will do literally anything to preserve and expand their power. If you've been keeping up with cryptos in any meaningful way, you know that the innovative people in the space are working on ways to level the playing field so that nobody can exert control over other people economically using cryptocurrency. This is not what the powers that be want. Their entire method of maintaining their power is based on them being in control of the monetary system. They do not want that, even though it would be the absolute best thing for humanity. 2. Debt reset to impose negative interest rates on the people. Understand that all debt-ridden regimes need negative interest rates to force the people to pay for the theft of the oligarchs. Once these people get the people to accept CBDCs as their only financial system, they can then impose negative interest rates on everyone, or the people they choose. And there will be nothing you can do about it because there won't be any alternative. Currently, they can't impose negative interest rates on people because as soon as they would do that, everybody would quickly run to withdraw their money from the bank. And that would make the situation even worse because the banks do not have all the depositors' money in cash form, which will most likely lead to civil disruptions, like riots, bank runs, the deletion of bankers, etc. 3. A cashless control state. This is what these oligarchs want the most. Their long-term goal is to remove cash from the system so that there's no way for you to escape their control. And the article quotes, "Under a CBDC regime, citizen money can be digitally monitored, withheld, frozen, taxed, penalized, or otherwise controlled should such a citizen or collection of citizens challenge or threaten the state, rightfully or wrongfully. Understand that financial and personal privacy will surely disappear under a CBDC system because you know that they will tie your money and social benefits to your compliance with their commands through the use of social credit scores. They showed a brief description of that in a Netflix show called Black Mirror. Gold, CBDCs, and a shortage of easy answers. The author goes on to say that, quote, "No easy answers to our current global nightmare, political, financial, or ethical, can rest solely upon a faith in institutions, individual leaders, or even technologies, as each of these solutions is vulnerable to the human element of corruption and ignorance. What will save us?" End quote. There are no real answers to this question. It seems that we, each individual, has to make a choice about what actions they will take to fight this persistent menace. One thing that we can do is to become aware of CBDCs and how they will likely be used. You can also share this information with others so that they will know better to fight against this power grab. The author mentions gold as an alternative. Gold is great at preserving the value that you have accumulated, but it has its own problems. It's really too cumbersome to be used as a medium of exchange, but it will hold its value better than just about anything else. I don't know anything that holds its value better, and it has done that for many hundreds of years. My takeaways. My opinion is that we must not be deceived into using CBDCs. They are the antithesis of what cryptocurrencies are all about. Cryptocurrency is an alternative to central banks if it can be developed outside of the control of the powers that be. Central banks are just tools for oligarchs to plunder the people, and with fractional reserve banking, they can control virtually every person on the planet. Maybe I'll get into more details about fractional reserve banking in another video because that's an entirely different subject. Any person that understands the current banking system and how it is totally fraudulent knows that CBDCs and their proponents cannot be trusted with this technology. Understand that these people have already let us know that they have a world totalitarian system ready to plug all humans into. They want the ability to control us all, and if we don't comply, they can easily turn off our money and effectively excommunicate anyone who doesn't follow their orders. This will be a living nightmare for anyone who values their freedom. I hope you learned something from this. Please share this video with as many people as you can. This is a topic of critical importance to all of us, and especially our children, because we have to fight for their freedom and ensure that they have it when they reach adulthood. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations, feel free to discuss them below. If you found value in this video, please comment, like, and subscribe to my channel for more videos. Thanks for watching.